Welcome to Clause 8, the #1 podcast on intellectual property, trusted by top in-house counsel, judges, and policymakers worldwide. Hosted by Eli Mazour, we bring you in-depth conversations with the personality shaping IP. Brought to you by TradeSpace, where ideas take flight.
I want to talk a bit about IPwe. Can you tell us what the idea for that was, and I guess what is your vision, and why do you think it played out the way?
Yeah, well, so my vision, changed a lot. So look, I've always, and what certainly wasn't the first to have this idea, but there's a really smart guy in the IP space named Jim Malachowski, and he runs a company called Ocean Tomo. And he did something called IPXI in, I can't remember when, 2010 maybe? No, maybe a little before that actually, 2007, 2008. And he had the idea to create a licensing exchange. And it didn't work for a bunch of reasons, but not because of his lack of intellect, his lack of foresight, or his lack of trying. And so I tried to buy, when that was going through a bankruptcy, I tried to buy it from Elliott owned it. Elliott had put a few $1 million into it for some reason. But they didn't, they would rather write it off than do it. So I interviewed a bunch of the people who worked at IPXI, and Jim had collected a really good team of people, and tried to figure out why it didn't work. So, I thought that the main problem they had was that it didn't scale. Like they weren't using, because they didn't exist, electronic systems to, accelerate certain processes. So the original thought with IPwe was, hey, we could use, blockchain technology and AI, which at the time was not generative AI, it was predictive analytics, to make it so that would scale. It just didn't work. Like it's after 5 years, we kept trying and trying, and it just didn't take off. And then generative AI came along, and we started to see what those systems can do. And I really thought, a year and a half ago, that special LLMs are the things that make large language models, the thing that makes generative AI work. And I really thought that what happened was that there'd have to be a specialized LLM, one focused on IP, one focused on whatever it is you're doing, that in order to be effective. And I was wrong there as well. So IPwe filed for bankruptcy 6 months ago. It's the auction is in a month or so. I'll bid on the assets. I'll get them back, but I'm going to have to reconfigure how IPwe does what it does. But I've got $14 million of my own money tied up in that one, so I'm not giving up on that. But it definitely needed to be to get a bath. If you remember, I started out as a restructuring lawyer, so I actually believe in restructurings. And so, I'm not ready to tell you what it is right now, but I'll tell you that it is coming back out, and I'm going to actually insert, if I'm the successful bidder, I'll insert it into one of my other operations. So my main day-to-day business now, and has been for the last year and a half, was a company called Savregar. And that invests in IP financing opportunities across the spectrum. So whether it's, royalties, IP litigation, IP credit, IP structured equity. And that's been something that I've wanted to do for years and years as well, is that I wanted to do it without raising a fund off my own capital. But I've wandered back into the raising. I can't help myself. Every once in a while I go back in and raise capital. So, we'll raise a couple $100 million to do that, and you'll probably see that launch in the next probably before you'll see that publicly before September.
What are your thoughts about a marketplace for patents in general?
I don't. So look, here's what I would say. Like, let's just. So one of the mistakes that I made at IPwe is I literally tried to boil the ocean. I would have been much better off focusing in on some narrow thing, and not trying to do things with all patents. The other mistake that I made, and I mean, it's a long list of mistakes, obviously. The other mistake I made was that I didn't think about it globally, and I was too focused on the United States. And so there's just certain jurisdictions, shockingly enough, China, for example, where a market type system would work. I think Japan is another one where it would work. I think that, and I think that the toughest sell would be the United States. And so, and particularly because the very people who lead it are sort of the Silicon Valley types who they just don't need it, right? They don't have any interest in it. So it's not helpful to them at all. But I think that the European mentality is slightly more open to it. I know that Japan's more open to it, and I know that China's more open to it. So what you'll see is that a guy who's worked with me for 10 years, he's doing it. He's starting it in China now, in Henan or Shanghai. It'll be one of the other place. And so we'll piggyback off what he's doing. And I know that, you know, in the West, it's really popular to, you know, hate China, to test anything they do, whether, no matter what it is. But so the links, the relationship between the companies will be very loose, but there's still, I mean, just so people know, there's still a whole bunch of Western companies operating in China, even though all they do is endlessly bitch about it. But there is an opportunity. And I think once people see it working, that it'll be easier for them to comprehend what it is. And so let me give you a classic space where it should work is SEP patents, right? So the last thing we want is a group in Alicante, Spain, controlling the global SEP market, but that's what the EU is trying to do. And I think it'll just be too ironic when China's the one that comes up with the market-based solution. I can't wait. And I think that will be the opportunity. So again, focusing in on, you know, a narrower country by country markets, and then focusing in on a much narrower subset of the patents is what you have to do before there's broader. And, you know, we'll see. I'm friends with Sean Antanabe, who runs Unified Patents, and super negative on patents. It's just, you know, too funny. I admire Sean. He's a super smart guy. I'm gonna have dinner with him in a couple of weeks. And you know, he just sent me an email he like you understand that, like, you know, I can't remember what number he is. I'll say 95, but maybe that's not right. But, you know, 95% of the world's patents are worthless. And he's like, so why don't you advocate for a system where we just file on the 5%? And I'm like, I don't think that's a bad idea. Like, I said, I think that large companies tend to carpet bomb, you know, for a reason. So they're the ones who don't want to have some standard at which they file at. But, you know, I would certainly be very comfortable with a system where there was, you know, a significant reduction in the number of patents, and, you know, the relevancy and value of those rose. I don't have any problem with that. So I'm not a advocate for whatever system it is that I think would work best.